And we're live.
So good evening, everybody. It is Thursday, March 2nd. This is a meeting of the commission. Is joining us on the live stream. And welcome to all the commissioners. I'm just going to do a roll call right now. Commissioner Benito.
Present.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Present.
Commissioner Ridgway.
Present.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Present.
And I'm Commissioner Wan's present. Thank you so much. So we have on our agenda first, we have one guest, Commissioner Zaid, who has come in. Commissioner Zaid, do you have any comment or
I can't hear
that
it
you would
here.
like to make?
I'm actually here just to, see the process, and then I know there's been some
Don't touch
concerns
anything, just keep
around
it go. Yeah, just
creating
keep
the
it going.
rules, getting the
I'm sure it's
training,
working,
and
so just,
kind
Okay.
of
you
establishing.
shouldn't need WebEx, you're fine, just let
That we need done or have in place. So I'm just really curious as to why some commissioners feel that these committees need to be established right away. Because I'm not understanding why they need to be established right away. I feel like at this point, what I'm hearing from members of the community and staff and of our monitoring team is that we need to focus on training. And I think that is like one of our biggest hurdles right now is just making sure we're on the same page with that. So if anybody can speak to why there's so much pressure to establish these committees, and not focus on what the main thing is right now, and that's becoming prepared to actually do the work that we were put in place for. And until I would like that answer, and then maybe I'll have more to add to that.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Said. And so we will move on to our some old business. I think we're expecting a few other guests, so we will let them speak when it is pertinent. And our old business is that we are still trying to refine a final version of Section 1 of the bylaws and rules for hopefully for passing at our next commission meeting. I've listed the specific sections that we are revisiting. However, I'd like to go a little bit out of order because there are things that are easier to resolve through discussion than others. The first section that we would like to look at again is 1.7 regarding meeting times, rules, and timekeeping. So that would be, I think, so do we have anything in there? So the purpose of looking at this section again is that some of our meetings have been going over time, unfortunately, and that puts a big strain on the community and also some of our support staff. So we want to, obviously there's a desire to do something for every meeting and get something done, but sometimes maybe it merits more discussion in other venues. So we would like to, so I think it's been proposed that we make it more explicit that we need to stop the meeting when the meeting is set to end. So, Jason, where would we put that best?
I would just, let's see if I can turn this down a little bit. I think probably the most appropriate part is under general meetings. And then here we can just add a provision that says meetings should stick to the time allotment on the agenda unless there is an emergency, and based on that emergency, there's a motion to continue the meeting longer. Just a simple thing.
Is there okay? So, is there any points of are there any points of clarification or discussion about that
Yes, to
proposal.
the chair.
Mhm.
Oh, your mic, I'm sorry.
To the chair, a question for Jason, a clarification, where the adjourn is listed here, was that number 12?
Yeah.
Is there a need to say that if the adjournment is scheduled? I mean, we can definitely adjourn before then, but we shouldn't go past whatever that adjourn time is without the caveat you just listed, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we could put in there, yeah, let's see here. Adjourn. I think there's a part in here about the agendas. Let's just make sure. This is the business meeting shall be as follow. So it's the general agenda here. Those matters authorized. So voting on business, yeah, adjourn. We can make a note here that just says, agenda, should include a start and end time, right?
Yeah.
Any extension of time should be via a motion and have a clear emergent need or something along,
Purpose, yeah.
yeah, emergent purpose, sure.
Ms. Rizzo?
My only question about that is, let's say that we're like almost to the point of finishing something. I like the idea that to go past the end time, there needs to be a motion, and I would suggest that the motion to adjourn, the motion to extend the meeting should include an amount of time that it's being extended for. But what I'm imagining is, okay, we're like really close to finishing something. I'm imagining a motion could be put, a motion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes to finish the discussion. That to me isn't emergent. So I don't know if
It has to be, it has to be with the consent of the majority. Do we want to say that has to be with the consent of everybody rather than the majority? Because that could help make it more emergent, or like a super majority, 2/3.
To the chair.
Yeah.
I don't think legally or within Robert's Rules of Order that you can adjourn if someone is speaking at the time of that, at the time of that scheduled time. You can't just adjourn it if someone is speaking in the middle of their presentation. And there was another thing. That was one comment. But there's a statement somewhere in all of this that state whether it's an emergency that's under discussion or whether someone is speaking, and you can't stop someone in the middle of a speech. And according to, if all the business is done, you can actually adjourn beforehand, and you don't really need to vote to have it adjourned within the time frame that's scheduled. You don't have to vote to have it adjourned.
Oh, Ms. Vija?
to the chair, I agree with, yes, Robert's rule says you can't adjourn while someone's speaking, but I don't think, like, if there's a vote on the table, I don't think Robert's rules, from what I'm remembering reading, is Robert's rules would just, if a vote hadn't been finished yet, it would just be moved to the next meeting. So I think that is kind of more of what I'm imagining.
Oh.
Yeah.
So for those listening in, we are trying to add a provision to make sure that we are timely in our meetings. As with any rule, when you write it down, you have to think of all the different scenarios. So do we have any more comment? So right now, we added a rule that says agenda should include a start and end time for the meetings. Any extension of time should be via a motion and have a clear purpose and should include an amount of time. A meeting may adjourn early with the conclusion of scheduled business. Commissioner Benito?
Should we say stated purpose? Clear stated purpose, that it has to be, you have to say it? Or maybe I'm just nitpicking.
I mean, maybe the word is like relevant or salient, I mean, someone could continue, I guess. Well, the motion has to pass. I mean, do we still want a majority passing that motion? That's fine? Okay. Maybe stated first, clear stated purpose. Are we okay with this? Or do we want to add stated?
I think it's fine, that's it.
I think it's fine.
Clearly stated purpose. And should include an amount. Is there any extent? Let's read it again. Okay. All right. So we're moving on. We're gonna come back to the executive sessions later, 1.71. I want to look at 1.82 now, which is the method of voting. So if you remember, we have made the roll call voting mandatory. However, we are having, maybe just because it is a little onerous sometimes for everything. But I think, it was Commissioner Van Leer that sent us an article, me and Jan, about transparency, that the roll call voting, but even without that article, I think the issue is when you do a voice vote, you need to, as somebody mentioned, you need to look at the number of mouths moving and not the volume, right? So we've had basically unanimous consent for our voice votes, but the volume is not necessarily an indication of the vote. So, right? So if there is any dissension, it's so it's just cumbersome, I think, to do that. So if we can do the roll call, we have made it, it's a preferred method right now. So how do we feel about, because I've seen certain times, and then when we do the roll call, someone needs to be keeping track of it. I also think for transparency, to hear every commissioner vote would be good for the public. So it is time consuming, but it's a matter of 20 seconds, I think. So any thoughts?
Point of clarification, are you saying adding a nonverbal because you're concerned about the volume, or am I misunderstanding?
I'm saying that making the roll call voting the mandatory method. Because, I mean, it seems like we just kind of feel the room and everybody's, maybe near unanimous, and then we choose. It seems a little bit arbitrary to me. It's been noted by a few other people. So I don't know if we want to take a little time to consider that. We can come back to this if you want to think more about it. And I've also noticed in our meetings that it doesn't necessarily say that much time. Ms. Benito?
I noticed that in some of our motions to adjourn, we haven't done roll call because it's like, everybody's. So one thing I think we could add a stipulation in there is that for procedural motions, like is mandatory except for procedural motions or except for motions to adjourn. Because I think that's the situation where, like, for something to adjourn, maybe it's not necessary for all of us to go around.
But then it gets into the problem of if somebody wants to extend time, right, for discussion. So
to the chair, there's a couple of things that I've noticed when we go back and try and do the minutes. One is when we don't do a roll call vote, it's impossible to tell from the video record of who did what. And a lot of times there's steamrolling too. So it's like especially with the adjournment, like there's no time for anyone to even to dissent. And some of the other votes, it's not just the adjournment. It's been a few others where people are like, okay, quick vote. Is there any all in favor? And they just hear, and then they go, any dissenters? No? Okay. And it's like no one even had a chance to breathe when they asked for dissenters. So I think that it absolutely should be roll call, and it should be, yes, is it boring to hear it at the end? Will it take an extra 3 minutes? But it just until we get in that practice.
It'll be good. If we remember everybody's name, and I think we also think from our community's perspective, they have this bird's eye perspective, right? We're in the room, we kind of can hear what's in the room. They would have a very hard time following it. And if it's a rule, then it's consistent. So is there any other concerns about this? No, so we'll be changing the roll call voting is the mandatory method. And as Commissioner Rodriguez has pointed out, for the time being, all these rules, we will need some type of enforcement person. So if we all temporarily, I know we're all learning Robert's rules, if we can all, since we're the rules committee, if we can all shepherd people, we're not going to banish them if they don't do it, but remind people. Okay, great. So we got 2 things done already. Yay, us. So I'm now just, Delonte is still not here, right?
No, he is not.
So we will, let's see, executive session, check wording. Okay, so I think we should move on to 1.44. So we have 2 sections that we're waiting for legal advice on, to counsel on, so that is why we're skipping those. 1.44 deals with leadership and specifically the deadline for the election of the co-chairs, if we want to set a timeline and how they will occur, to give more structure to something that will occur pretty soon, hopefully. So any discussion on this? Any thoughts? Ideas? So right now we don't have a timeline. It just says that, what was it? It was before February, right? But before February, except, so do we need to add that except this year? We need to add that. Because this year we can't do that, but do we need to say by March, by April, by May? Or do we need to discuss how that will occur first before we get that timeline? Commissioner Johnson?
To the chair, I believe I've heard some discussion about maybe having co-chairs selected before the end of March. So that would be, because we have 2 more meetings scheduled, right? Full meetings. I personally think that it is feasible for us to do that before the end of March. I just don't know if we should put it in there or if we should leave it more open. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
To the chair. In our regular full assembly meeting next Wednesday, we will be looking at determining the interest of people who want to be the chair. Robert's rules give the chair, even a temp chair, the purview to be able to select or establish an ad hoc committee. And so we are hoping that we can establish 2 ad hoc committees. One would be one that would be polling all of the members to see if there are people who are interested in being the chair, and they could bring that slate back to the full assembly at whatever time we decide is appropriate. But at least we would have an idea. They would have an opportunity to talk to the individual members who are interested, to also be able to talk to them about leadership abilities and experience and what they bring to the table. Not making any commitment, not determining whether you will or won't, but if you're interested, it gives us an idea of how many people might be interested in co-chairing. The same thing for the committees. There are 6 standing committees and 2 temporary committees that we'll be talking about. You see the 5 that we've been talking about all along, but there's also an outreach committee. So an ad hoc committee would allow us to poll our membership and see what committees people are interested in serving on. Again, it's not a commitment, but it just shows us where the interest is. And I have been talking to our staff, Ryan, who is able to create a process to do that where it would be anonymous. We would just know that there are 8 people who are interested, for instance, in one of the police commissions. And, and then we would have to determine how we move forward. But just to have an idea of how many people are interested in what committees. And I think in talking to the chair, I think that the thing that was a concern is to keep it anonymous. So we don't know who is interested in what. And Ryan is working on a process for that to happen. I think it's important that we begin to talk to each other, that we began to develop processes and procedures by us, for us, and that we began to trust a process that we have established. And I think by working with staff and an ad hoc committee who would be willing to take that on and talking to each committee, our commission member, that would help to create that kind of working environment among the group.
Thank you, Commissioner Ridgway. And I think, to speak to the anonymity, and it would be like what they call a double blind. So the person, Ryan, who's doing this would not know who the commissioners are. It's to encourage everybody to just go with your heart and your passions and not worry about, who's on which committee. And that is what was our intent, is to get us back on the focus of how we can put our talents and abilities and our passions in the right committees. Obviously, of the 3 police committees, there's a lot of overlap. There's going to be a lot of work across committees. There's also going to be work groups within those committees that can be staffed by non-committee members. But this was just an attempt to get the ball rolling and get us to the next step. So we are talking basically about 1.44 and 1.45. Can I just direct everybody back to the co-chairs? So it sounds like if we're going to have some interest, so that committee would obviously not be, or that nomination process would not be anonymous because we need to know who wants to be co-chairs. So if that's the first meeting, the second meeting, should there be a speech given? And this, it seems like it may take more than 2 meetings to me, and then we vote on the third meeting, and it would be, or like I would just hate for us to say, oh, this, like, and I agree with Commissioner Johnson, like we give ourselves a deadline, then we're like meeting the deadline rather than giving ourselves the pathway to finding the right 2 co-chairs.
To the chair, another thing about bringing a list of people to the table, you can always open the nomination on the floor for anybody who might have changed their mind, between the time a list was brought and the time it was presented. You can actually, the chair can open nominations, and somebody else may want to recommend or nominate somebody to add to that list.
So we have any more comment on this? So how long does that sound like it would take, that process that we want?
Looking at the calendar, that would be April the 5th, if we believe 3 meetings from, or starting next week.
Do we feel that 3 meetings is sufficient? 3 full commission meetings?
Yes.
Yes. So do we want to put April 5th as the date? Coach has elected on April 5th. It gives a good, deadline for us, but it's out there, so it gives people time to think about this.
So interest will be, chair to the chair. So this is what I'm hearing from the conversation. Initial interest will be declared on our next meeting on March 8th, right? Is that the next meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Declare nominated, right?
No, well, that wouldn't be nominations. That would just be people saying, I'm interested, right? And then you would have, the next one would be March 22nd, right?
To the chair, Jason, excuse me. The 8th meeting would just be the announcement that we will be developing this ad hoc committee. The ad hoc committee would be appointed, and for the commissioners to expect that interaction between the members of the ad hoc committee and the individual people to determine interest.
So then we need 4 meetings.
No.
So then they announce it and they give their speech at the same time? Sorry. They will, at the second meeting, you would declare your intentions and give a speech.
You'd have to have a nomination. So at some point you need nominations in there. So the question is, can you nominate yourself? So, that has to be declared whether a person can nominate themselves. So then you have to have a second typically. So you'd have to have somewhere in here where formal nominations occur. So maybe between, you have a chance between your ad hoc committee and then, come prepared at that time with your, with your possibility of nomination on the 22nd.
And they'll be allowed to give a speech at that meeting? Is that what we're looking for? Is this going to take, I'm just saying from a time perspective, a lot of time may have to be devoted to this at that meeting. Ms. Benito?
The chair, so if the ad hoc committee is reaching out to everybody to say, I want to, we want to get an understanding of your interest. My understanding would be that then at the March 22nd meeting, that committee would come to the meeting and say, we have this list of people who are interested. Do we have any nominations for chair? Then, I think it could also be opened, as Commissioner Ridgway said, is there anyone who is not on this list who is wants to nominate somebody or would like to self-nominate? And then I'm not sure what we would do beyond that. I don't know if everybody needs to make speeches. No, yeah, I'm kind of more leaning toward, yeah.
It seems like on the 22nd, you will make speeches.
Yeah, it would be, I mean, it doesn't have to be, Lincoln here. I would like to, I think it would be helpful because we have people that we have talked more with and other, that it's not equal. Just that maybe, do we want to provide some guidelines as to what the speech will contain, like what you hope to, like questions for them to answer? They can still go, they can still be creative.
To the chair, I think that could be the, part of the task of the ad hoc committee, as they talk to people to establish that, and then they bring that back to the 22nd meeting, the list, and they would have already determined that process. They would have already determined that process prior to coming back with the names, and the people at that point can choose to speak on their behalf if they, if they want to.
Dare I ask how the ad hoc committee will be? Would it be the people that don't want to be co-chairs, or would that be the fairest thing?
I don't think it has to be that. They can be part of the, the group that's nominated if they want to. I don't see why it has to be that it has to be people who don't want to be nominated. I actually thought about two people who could be appointed to that assignment. I don't know if they want to be or not, but I had planned to talk to them prior to, I had planned to talk to them prior to the 8th meeting. I was just waiting to see how things would wash out tonight.
Yeah. So do we, or who is appointing the ad hoc committee then?
Robert's rules give the chair,
Okay.
because it's a temporary committee. It dissolves right after that particular task is accomplished. It doesn't exist after that. So, yeah.
Okay, so that part is that, and then nominations and potential speeches. I don't think we have to force someone to give a speech. I hope they will occur on the 22nd, and then the co-chairs will be elected. How will we elect them? I think that you cannot do can you do an anonymous vote?
To the chair, in the past, we've done it with paper ballots, and then the executive director and staff will do that, and there'll always be a person and a second, similar to the way I think we went through a similar exercise with one of the committees where Delonte was there. So the ED will count the votes, and then there'll be a second staff person confirm the count, and then we'll make the announcement. And what you have to determine though is, are you going to make, so there's a question here, we've done it both ways in the past. Are you going to do it each a separate vote, or is it going to be the top two vote getters will automatically be it, or will you assign a co-chair and then restart the vote again for a second co-chair? So it's a choice there. Yeah.
And I think there's a third possibility. We obviously want our co-chairs to be able to work very well together, so if anticipating that maybe they're, I don't know what could be. Do we want them to go in as a co-chair team, like run that way? And you can have multiple possibilities. You can have multiple.
That's something we've never done, but it's certainly, it's your canvas.
Yeah. I like that idea.
Yeah.
Madam Chair. Should have called your name first, but yeah. Yes, I like that.
I'm just remembering in the history of our country, I believe, the second place winner automatically
Yes.
became the vice president. I'm not sure if that was go well. So,
So we
but
can,
who knows?
Mm.
Mr. Dawson?
To the chair, so if we do have the option of them running together, then I'm assuming that would need to occur on the 22nd. We would give them that idea and put it out there. I guess we need to decide if we're gonna go that route, because then that kind of determines what happens
Right,
after.
then we need another meeting, it looks like, right? Another meeting for this, because that occur and they have to give speeches together?
To the chair.
Yeah.
To the chair, that can also be determined as they discuss, as the ad hoc people discuss this whole thing with the membership. You know, especially if there has been some discussion and there are members who would like to come forward as a team.
So do we need to extend it? Should we just give a little bit of wiggle room on the deadline?
No.
No?
To the chair, I think that it needs to be elected on April 5th. I have full confidence that we can make that happen by then. I think that in terms of exactly how the pairs will be figured out, I'm comfortable leaving that to the ad hoc committee to, I think conversations will happen between people and with the ad hoc committee.
Yeah, we do have to decide, it's either the pairs or it's the single, because we can't, do both. But then Jason's suggestion is not just top two. So we're doing rank voting, or what are we doing?
so in the past, it was, the prevalent way to do it was everyone runs individually, even though there's co-chairs, and then top two vote getters automatically assume the position of co-chairs. But to your point, does it always work out with chemistry between the two? Absolutely not. So there is risk to doing it that way. And I think chemistry is important to consider. And so I don't have a preference, but I think that's a novel idea to have two people pair up who know they can work with each other.
And also, I would say diversity of thought and experience would be good in the co-chairs too. Commissioner Johnson.
To the chair, I was just gonna add that, I think as the ad hoc committee is having conversations, that question can be asked, like, is it a possibility for you all to run it? What do you think? Because the nominees or, people who want to be chairs or co-chairs might say that they don't want to run with someone. So I think that would determine how we
And
proceed.
they could also run with multiple, they can run in multiple pairs. That's a possibility. You don't have to just choose one.
I think that'll kind of muddy it up a little bit.
You might muddy it up.
Yeah.
Well,
I think with
yeah.
the ad hoc committee having the conversations, then that will determine how people who are interested in the co-chair positions will want to proceed. Because if they say, oh, I'm not interested in running with someone, then, we can't force it.
Oh, no, I'm saying that if the person is willing to run with multiple people, at least that person, but then to force them to only go with one person, that maybe would not be the top vote getter. They would have to strategize again. I'm trying to eliminate all not strategies, but that could be the ad hoc committees. Like, if you have all you're worried about is people not wanting to work together.
Correct.
Right. So if they're
Or not Sigma, let me take that back,
okay.
not wanting to run together.
run
'Cause
run together because of some, yes. Okay. I'm hoping that everyone's willing to work together.
To the chair, I think we need to remember too that we have a staff who has experienced some of this before. So I would hope that the ad hoc committee would be willing to talk to the interim executive director as well as to Ryan, in research. He had some really good ideas when we talked earlier this week. And I think that we can give that responsibility to the ad hoc committee working directly with staff to finalize the process.
Great. So are we okay with this new wording? So now it will be, we added, per our last meeting, I think it was already added as an amendment by Commissioner Van Leer, that the procedure and timeline for this year shall be, so I think he had added an amendment. Do we need to take it out? He had added something about except for this year, which will provide an exemption to this year.
let's see, for the committees, yeah, but
Yeah.
I just want to make sure since we defined a little bit of the committee work, it's probably worth putting that in here. So I just want to make sure committees will determine voting procedures and, and how,
Parent, candidate slate, yeah.
now that seems like they can exclude someone from being on the slate.
No,
Do they have
combination?
Well, really, the only thing they're doing is determining the procedures, correct?
Okay.
So maybe just leave it at that.
okay.
And candidacy, I guess.
Well,
And
discuss.
I would say vetting.
What do you mean by vetting? Sorry.
Like,
As far as getting interest,
yeah.
Okay.
um, maybe determine interest in voting procedures.
And chemistry.
Yes.
Chemistry in there.
No.
Interest, I think, is good. That's the purpose.
Matchmakers, they're gonna be matchmakers.
So, to the chair, just one other point. So, do you want to leave it open? So right now you have, co-chairs will be selected every year. Do we want to leave the process open every year, or should we put a note that, this general process will be repeated, each year?
Oh, but we're gonna be here, I mean, what is a general process, meaning timeline, or just a general process? So we don't wanna do this again next year like this?
To the chair, I think that we should leave some flexibility here. I think that, even though it will be all the same group of people the next year, in the future, people might want to look at it a different way, and I would want to leave some flexibility. I think because we are so new, I think this year having a laid out procedure is helpful. I think that if after next year we feel like we should have it in the rules, we can always revise the rules to have that.
One more comment to the chair, and that is that we have said that we would review the bylaws annually anyway. So at that point, if we feel that this process did not work well, or we need to try something else, we have that opportunity to include it in the bylaws when we review it, at an annual date.
So we are having, what I was mentioning before is that I believe in our last meeting, Commissioner Van Leer made the amendment, it was passed about accept this year. Do we have to reverse that amendment now? He just added, accept this year.
For committees, so the problem is you can't undo something in committee that was voted by a quorum of the whole. So whatever, that motion, and we have it, I can go back and, read the exactness of it, if you give me a minute. We have to take that as the amendment that the whole wanted. So we can't undo, the wording.
I thought it was for, it was not this amendment. He made an amendment to February to make sure that we were in compliance. So what is the procedure to insert this language now for the voting of the co-chairs?
My memory is that there was an amendment to say that except for the first year.
Right. So it's
So-
in there right now.
Right. So I think we could just say, we could still have that in there. Yeah.
And then just add that first year, and then the process will be as follows. So if we can add that one in to make sure. Okay,
That was the division of these trainings. Oh, sorry.
I think that's something that we probably can figure out later.
Yeah, and I can go, if
Not a
there's,
conflict.
so we know that has the final say. So if there's any conflict, yeah, I will automatically just revert it to what the quorum voted for. But I don't think, that there's any conflict so far
Right.
with what we just did there.
And we could, I guess, reintroduce this new language if we wanted, if we needed to.
The chair,
Commissioner Viejo?
I do know that Commissioner Van Leer rewatched the recording to make note of what the exact motions were. Would you like me to text him to see if he made note of that?
You can. I think I watched that portion too, and I remember that he made that exception So, but if it's not in conflict here, I think we're still safe.
Okay.
You're free to if you want to.
No, I think we're good.
Okay. So we are settled with that. 1.44. So let's move on to 1.45. Thank you very much. About the subcommittee. So the questions we want to give a little bit more form to are: when are they formed? What does a potential process for selecting members look like? Define the outreach community committee and how to handle existing committees after the rules are adopted. So where do we think that we want to start the discussion? We can discuss it globally. Commissioner Benito?
I think the simplest one is going to be define outreach committee, so maybe we start there.
Sure. So, Jason, has there been can you give us a background and what the expectations maybe for the outreach committee would be and their goals that you see it?
To the chair, historically, the outreach committee has just had one simple focus, and that's to kind of set or approve a high-level strategy for the staff to follow with any ideas or priorities for outreach. So in the past, they've worked jointly with the staff to create an outreach strategy that has a cycle of like 1 year, right? It talks about how many meetings you want to have. Are there any specific neighborhoods we want to go into? Are there specific audiences that we need to hit? Comes up with some general objectives for us to follow as a roadmap here as staff to meet the consent decree requirements to touch as many communities as possible and involve them in our conversation. So it's not a micromanaging the outreach thing. We don't have to go into very specific detail. It's just a discussion, bringing everyone's brain power to the table about how to reach, coming up with a strategy to reach communities that are hard to reach.
Will they be able to define communities that are hard to reach? Because there could be.
It's up to them. I mean, sure, there's communities we don't think of or might not be thought of, but its primary focus too is coming up with a set of objectives for the ones that are primarily mentioned in the consent decree as priority communities.
Thank you so much. Do we have any discussion or additions or to that? Commissioner Ridgway?
To the chair, not necessarily just the outreach committee, but I would like for the interim executive director to define list the committees that are considered standing committees. And because I think in discussion, you identified two of our existing committees as temporary rather than standing. So if you could identify those, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, and these are the standing. So the ones in the rules these are shall at a minimum maintain these committees here. So the only one that isn't in here is the internal training committee. So that's the one right now that we have that is not a permanent standing committee. And I'm sorry, to the chair, the hiring committee, which hasn't met yet, so that's why it escaped my mind, which was talked about but has not had a meeting. Those would be two that will go away after they accomplish their mission.
And I think this will bridge into maybe the second part of the conversation. If we may want to get more clarity on the responsibilities and the overlap and the relationships between all these committees at some point. So have we sufficiently defined the outreach committee? Do we need to write something up? Is there something already written about? Commissioner Benito?
I think it would be helpful to have like a couple sentence description of each committee in this document. And with the understanding that, of course, the committee, this might change over time, but I think even just a high level description, I think would be helpful, especially as we start the process of people deciding what committees they want to be on.
Is everything okay? Do we want to add this now or have Jason?
It's something simplistic we can do in 5 minutes here, and
Okay.
That way it's set.
And then we have the knowledge too. So the outreach committee establishes high-level goals and objectives for community engagement and establishes a strategic plan along with staff on a year or bi-yearly basis. Okay, and the obvious, one of the primary focuses is the communities that have not been reached according to the consent decree. Okay? Benito?
Do you want to add like, because I'm imagining that the outreach committee might also do kind of projects, community outreach, but you said no, maybe like.
Projects are so fluid, it's, you know, every committee's gonna have projects, so, yeah.
So this is just, it doesn't need to, it's not exhaustive, the description, just a high level.
Right, and I think if they can tell us which communities are, you know, have not been reached, that maybe the whole commission come up with plans.
And in the rules, we don't really have to list community, because they could change, they can be fluid, you know, so the priority of those communities could change based on, you know, the times or changing demographics of the city. So I think this, you know, it goes unsaid that there's communities, because it's in 115 as well. It's very detailed lists the communities that we're supposed to be interacting with. So.
And there's also different demarcations of what makes a community, right, based on location, racial demographics, class, all those things. And we hope that they think about all those dimensions. So we're now looking at the Police Investigations, Discipline, and Accountability Committee. I think it's fairly spelled out in its title. Okay, so far we have that the Police Investigations, Discipline, and Accountability Committee are responsible for the disciplinary process, analysis of disciplinary and accountability data, and they are the lead committee for evidentiary hearings related to disciplinary actions. Any thoughts, any additions? Ms. Benito?
Would this committee be generating recommendations to the full committee for voting on disciplinary actions?
To the chair, through the chair to the council person, to the commissioner. Oh man, my roles are getting blurred here. So in this one, if you were going to do an evidentiary hearing, so if a case came before you, it would be this committee that would probably prep for that hearing and be ready to take that procedural hearing to the group as a whole. So this is where that initial exploratory should or shouldn't we take this issue would come through. In my mind, you have to have a process for that, right? And you're not going to get consensus agreement. It needs to be through a committee that has a specialized eye for what cases need to catch the attention of this oversight body. So this is where that would originate in my mind.
Ms. Benito?
So to the chair, but the actual decision making about discipline oversight, that is a responsibility of the whole body.
That's up to the future rules to determine, but I would recommend that, yes, that's how most boards would do it. I wouldn't want a committee to solely handle that. You would want the whole board and probably a supermajority vote standard if you were going to overturn the discipline of any officer.
That makes sense. So that's a problem for later rules committee.
Not us right now. A later
Us
version
at a
of
later,
us.
yeah, us at a later date.
All right, thank you. And also the generation reports related to that fact. So I'm hoping that's pretty clear. And we can, so the next committee is the Police Training Committee. And Jason, if you could, before you type it down, could you just verbally express it? So that
He might be typing
Here.
I know for me, I have to type it.
he should have this by memory.
Yeah. So this one to the chair, this one is fairly self-explanatory. So 115.5 gives the commission final authority on police training curricula. So this would be the committee that looks at training curricula in detail, you know, and assesses that against best practice, you know, et cetera, and makes final recommendations, or final curricula sends back to the division. I imagine, you know, all of these, with the exception of the discipline one, most of these would be very collaborative with the police in my mind. So that way it's not a power flex. Like hopefully they would say, we're working on this. Can we come to your committee and talk about it? And then that would be kind of organic creation of something that everyone has a stake in. In a healthy world, that's how that would go.
How does this relate to the existing training committee? Are they one and the same?
No.
They're different. So do we have the other training committee up here?
No, this is, this committee is about training with the police,
Right, but where's
Our
the other training committee?
training us.
That's a temporary, that's one of the temporary. Okay.
To the chair, it's internal training.
Internal training.
Yeah, that's for the
okay.
commissions, establishing the commission's training for
Okay.
the next 6 months.
Okay, thank you. I got confused there for a while, yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna totally spell this wrong.
CURRI. Curricula.
Alright.
No. See. Okay, so we have the police training committee will be responsible for the oversight and audit of Division of Police Training and training curriculum. Okay. So the next one is Police Policy Committee.
Okay, to the chair, this one will look at GPOs, the general police orders, and be involved either proactively or when the police are in the process of updating a GPO. So they will have that. Typically, each GPO will be specialized, so they'll form a work group and bring in some experts about that, do some research on it. You know, so it's either this group will either drive what policies need to be revised, or will work collaboratively with police on their schedule to revise policy. And yes, is there some crossover? Sure. Does it cross over to training? Yes. You know, so there will have to be collaboration, but you have to have some lines to follow, you know, some general lines. And again, the 115.5, the reason these are standing committees is because each one of these is a power enumerated in 115.5 that you have final say over, or an extreme amount of ability to intervene in.
And Ms. Jason, would you be able to give us maybe some, I think the investigations is pretty clear, but some samples of previous work that the committees have done with the police training and policy, just to differentiate the interest a little bit? What have they been able to do, and what are they expected in practice?
Yeah.
So I know this is over.
To the chair, yes. So it's been you can port over a work group, right? So that's the good thing about it. If you have experts, like I'll give you an example. The largest workload we had was search and seizure. It was like 5 different policies, and that's everything from what we would hear on the street as stop and frisk to, you know, when you can actually, and Miranda rights is part of that. So a lot of stuff, right? We had some in-house expertise, but we amplified that with even more people through a work group. And we looked at each of those. We did a process similar to what we're doing now. We threw the policies up there and had this collaborative brain trust just go through every single word for months on end until we had a product. Afterwards, the same committee, because we were short staffed and there's only so many people, reviewed the training that was associated with the GPOs they just created, right? In this instance, after the policy did its work, if the people who were on the work group wanted to go over and also help develop the training, they could, but it would technically go over to the people who manage training, because the problem you had there was you had some great people who were familiar with the law do the policy part, right? But they weren't necessarily familiar with best practices in adult education and the most modern, things related to how do we train today, how do adults learn best. So I think that's why there should be a delineation here, because you get people who are really experts in education on the other one, right? Who really think about all that, get trained on adult education practices and what's happening in that world, versus the policy people who love to write down on paper, what they should learn. So there is some division in that.
Thank you so much. I think that is a good point of clarification. But it sounds like the policy committee will require a lot of the committees, a lot of research, right? All of them, I think, and taking in a lot of research. So the police policy committee, this committee has oversight of the general police orders and audits the performance of those GPOs.
And if these sentences are generally okay with you, if you just give me some artistic license, and after you vote it, just say, Jason has some license to tweak these sentences a little bit, so long as we don't lose the
Spell
context.
check.
Yes.
License, artistic license granted.
Poetic license.
Yeah.
Do we have any more discussion? Do you have any thoughts so far? No, we're okay. Okay. So we have the outreach committee, the grants and budget, and the rules committee. I think those are fairly obvious, right?
Yeah. If you want me to add a sentence, I can, but I think we generally understand that.
Practice it. You can do that. We can give Jason the license to do that later. Okay, so we are done with.
Yeah, if you could put a sentence in later, but yeah, just so it's complete.
Thank you. So we will be, so I think now that we have an idea of what the roles of the subcommittees are.
To the chair,
Yes.
sorry, one more thing. At one point, we did mention breaking grants and budget into two. I forgot what we decided or we said about that.
I think we said because the budget meets only a few times.
Okay,
They do it like in the beginning for the city budget as well as when the committees submit their budget. So
okay, just wanted to be sure.
I think it's, they would meet a few times, and we're expecting that committee. We were going to give latitude for everyone to trim down committees that are not have too many people at this point. Okay.
So the chair, I did find that motion here from Pete Venlier. So he had an amendment on page 11 that's added with exception of first year. So let me bring up what that would mean.
I still don't think that would be a contradiction because we just have the process listed below, so it should be okay.
But I didn't, add that in here yet. So let's see on page 11. Maybe I have the pages wrong here.
Pages 1.4.
It must be 11 on the printed document. That's what
1.44.
1.44.
It's the end of this bullet point right here. Terms will be 1 year, and kosher shall be like no later than February of each calendar year, with the exception of the first of the year.
So no conflict. That's correct.
Okay, great. So we're going to move on to more deep dive into 1.45.
There was
Now,
one other
is
part
there?
to his amendment. Yeah, let's bring it up here. And then new committees will be formed after initial training occurs. So we're on that now, but this was what was.
So that is, so that goes into 1.45. I think there's been a lot of discussion about when the subcommittees, or we'll just call them, can we we're going to call them committees? So we're going to make a global change that the subcommittees will become committees. And so this is relevant because Commissioner Van Leer's amendment, we voted on already and it passed. So it already says that it will be formed after initial training occurs. So that was affirmed during our meeting. It was a double amendment, I believe.
Oh.
So I checked on that because I spoke to Commissioner Van Leer. So that defines So I know that there is a lot of, very impassioned discussion about when these committees will be formed. At least I think we should at least open the floor to, we heard a little bit from Commissioner Zaid, her perspective. She's on the training committee. So I think it's not clear exactly when the training will, I think that's one of the issues is that it's not clear when the training will end. So I'm just opening the floor to discussion on this issue, even though Commissioner Van Leer's amendment, what will we have to do to overrule this if we decide that?
To the chair, this committee could not overrule it, so that wording has to stand. The vote was to keep that wording. The debate was, should we change the wording, and the group voted to keep it, that we do not form these committees until after the initial training occurs. So
I guess, there is the initial training, I guess there is some, what does that mean, right? Is that all of our training before we?
And we could take them, I could probably pull the video up if we want to hear the exact wording, but I started the minutes and that's what I wrote down in the minutes is that
I checked it too.
Yeah, he voted to keep the language on this as after the initial training, because there were some commissioners who wanted to move it to let's form the committees now. So that was the debate moment there.
So to the chair.
Oh, I think also tells this to me. Yes.
So we know that that statement does not apply to all those committees because some of those have been established, even if in a temporary way.
It says police related.
Police related. So last night's meeting talked a lot about the police training and began to establish some tentative timelines to the interim executive director. Could you repeat the outcome of that meeting as far as scheduling the police training?
Through the chair to the commissioner, our first police training is scheduled to occur will be our second because we had the initial couple hour contact hours. So we had 2 contact hours, and then we're talking about an 8-hour day, which will cover a great deal of our police block, right? The block is approximately 20 hours, so we probably have at least another 8-hour block in addition to this one, and that will occur on April 22nd. So the plan is to get at least 1 Saturday training in per month, which will knock off that. So they voted to adopt the training outline as it is. So the order and the generalized things, plus they added 4 areas to the end of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that general outline you have in your initial packet is mostly what the training will be. So it's roughly 20 hours of police training. So I anticipate that what that sentence means for us is probably within 60 days, you'll be able to form these committees. So if we have 2 8-hour blocks of police training plus the 2 contact we already got, that should cover the training block in enough to do that.
So I just think I know that there are differences of opinion and approaches on this, so I just want to open the floor to, I think it's, so the initial, actually what he did was leave it, right, it's initial training period, we just don't know. So you're saying 60 days now, approximately, of course, we're not gonna,
Approximately, it could be less than that. It could be. So if we, depending on if we go early May for the next one, it'll probably be back-to-back Saturdays at the police academy, right? Not back-to-back like 2 consecutive Saturdays, but 2 Saturday trainings with whatever time in between will be police focused. So the other training that was scheduled last evening was March 25th. And so that one will be the legal block, which comes before the police training, so that you have some foundational legal knowledge when the police teach you about the policies that have legal components to it. So that's the tentative schedule at the moment.
so then, sorry, Commissioner Rodriguez.
So to the chair, I think having that 60-day, just a tentative date, I think that will provide some clarification, because I think it was unreadiness, because there's a lot of instances in that we wanted to do our due diligence, but we wanted to ensure we get to work. So thank you for providing that information.
Yeah, I think that gives us all, everyone feels a little bit more, but so there's no way actually to change this right now, because it's, so we have to, is everybody okay with, Commissioner Benito?
My suggestion would be just to, for the sake of clarity, I know we can't change this, but I think we could add a second sentence, correct, that says, you know, about kind of saying that every effort will be made to conclude just general training from 90 days from the adoption of the rules. That way there's just some clarity that we can point to.
Right. I think, you know, so what I'm hearing is that we, you know, we want to be able to have the training in a, you know, efficient manner, but also gives us time to process the training and also to do it in a way, you know, thankfully, we have not yet had to respond to anything that's happened in the community. So do you see any issues with adding that, Mr. Goodrick?
To the chair, no. I think you can add a second sentence that says, you know, every intention to have these formed within 90 days of adoption of the rules should be made. To the point of not being able to do anything, I want to dispel that rumor. You don't have to stand still. You know, I think Dr. Adams said, you know, we can walk and chew gum. He's not incorrect. It doesn't mean that you can't work on anything police related. It doesn't mean you can't have a special meeting about a topic to listen to the community's concerns about policing. It doesn't mean that you can't start some research into a topic with the staff, right? So we don't have to paralyze ourselves while we wait to get through the training, right? So you can be creative within this, you know, to if you feel something needs to be done. And to the point of, there was a gentleman who came to our meeting and said, what if tomorrow something happens? What are you going to do? Well, the staff is here to help you with that as well, right? We will quickly, if there were a crisis that happened, right, we will quickly get you up to speed on what you need to know relative to that specific topic and crisis, right? If you're willing to work with us, we will quickly get you prepared to move forward and tackle that issue as reasonably as and as quickly as possible, right? So I don't want people to believe that we're some kind of paralyzed group until we have training, because we're not. We're very capable. You're all very intelligent, and we have flexibility, a lot of flexibility here to do both walk and chew gum.
Thank you for that. Ms. Benito, would you still like to propose adding that? Is everybody okay with that statement? Okay. So we're adding, so it says the first class of commissioners, for the first class of commissioners, police-related committees will be formed after the initial training occurs. The commission shall make every effort to complete the minimum amount of training required to establish these committees within 90 days, right, of the adoption of these rules. Okay, great. So I think then we need to, so let's handle the first one, the last part of that, how to handle existing committees after the rules are adopted. So the existing committee is just two that are, I have, if I can get an update from the hiring committee.
Point of clarification, are you saying that we're done with the when are they formed?
No, I'm going to move that
Okay,
last.
gotcha.
Because it might be a more, a longer conversation. How to handle existing committees after the rules are adopted. Can I get an update from, there's some people that are from Mr. Donaldson, the hiring committee. Is it, are you going to be able to get that into 5 people?
Yeah, so we have not met yet, and I was kind of waiting on how they're going to be formed part 2. So that will have a lot to do with how we move forward. And then also, if we are going to give people the option of selecting which committees they want to be on, then I guess the other thing we have to discuss is, will we include the temporary committees in that time as well? So there are a lot of questions that, you know, are floating around.
Yeah, I think the one, Mr. Goodberg.
To the chair, point of clarification, did you say we're going to eliminate the wording subcommittee and just universally call it committee?
Yes.
Was that so? Okay.
Was there a reason it was listed as subcommittee? No.
No.
Subcommittee.
That was random Jason brain. That's the reason.
It sounds more like technical and, right? So I understand your point, because if we're not opening these committees until after training occurs, then what do we do about the commissioners that are leaving those committees? Obviously they have plenty of other things to do. So right now we're, overcoming this by not having the full, I think it's only the budget and grants is 7, right? The other one is 6. So it's only ours that it's really, Hardy's 8. We haven't met, so right, yeah. So, I guess it would require, are you comfortable proceeding with the whole, is there anything illegal that we can, legality wise?
So to the chair, an 8-person committee is a problem because its vote is a vote for the entire commission.
So with
We have
all
a 7
to the chair, yeah, I believe that I'm able to, I believe that everyone on my committee has made a substantial input and has provided value in every topic that we have discussed. I do not foresee an issue with the 7, because I agree, we do not want to ensure that we're not speaking on behalf of the whole commission. I can always do a voting chart if there was instances where we have never had 7 people vote unanimously the same way on any issue. But if it occurs, it's not going to occur, but I can always say I'm not going to vote. I can abstain. I can use a voting chart. Since it is the only committee, that's
in that perilous territory. So, Mr. Goodrich.
And to your point, it's not putting faith in a person saying I won't do this. It's not about the person. It's about, you may not be in that position, Commissioner, and so the problem is there, right? That if they decided as a committee to break that rule for a reason, and I'm not saying that is something they're thinking, they then have the power unchecked to pass something without any discussion with the whole group. So it is a danger that, as the law department said, you shouldn't take that risk. It was the law department that said this. Don't have a committee that has a quorum of the whole. So the rule, when it becomes the rule, you will have to have a process. Good faith is one thing, but good faith just doesn't work when you have that saying, we're going to pass a rule, but we're going to break the rule. It doesn't,
Right.
If it's a rule, then you have to have a process for reducing the committees to the size. And if you put a rule in here that chairs can't vote, then that's a standing rule for all the committees, and that's up to you. So then that probably gives you some leeway to have one more, but you also have an established rule. They have co-chairs in that. So, there isn't a rule that says how many chairs. So it's up to you to decide, but I would recommend that you have a standard and stick to that standard.
Because we're going to keep changing it. Ms. Benito.
Chair.
Oh.
Well, I'll let you go since I spoke already.
Here's my suggestion to how to deal with this is I would say that I feel strongly about the 3 to 5 commissioner rule, and that it should be applied equally among all the committees. My suggestion for how to handle all of this would be to, if we know that the co-chairs are going to be chosen by the end of March, I think we say that committees should be staffed by the end of April, because then we'll know who the chairs are, and so that will kind of immediately remove some people from all the committees. And then I would say that we can, and then my suggestion would be that in that month, when we go through that process that Commissioner Ridgway has talked about, that we actually just reselect all the committees. And so I know that, you know,
No. So like the rules, the rules from the end about everything?
I would, and I think that, do you think we would be done with the, second section by the end of April?
Are you asking about will we be completed with the police section?
Yeah.
No, the first one doesn't occur till April 22nd, so by the end of May, yes.
No, I mean the manual,
Oh,
the rules manual.
no, because there's gonna be some very complicated parts in section 2 that might take us, several months to just do the research on and such as.
Do you think when do you think we'll start that section?
Well, section, as soon as the completion of this, but
Oh, okay.
that's a question for the
Yeah, because
chair,
I think that is my only concern with the turnover is that if people are midway, but I mean, I really don't think that, so that's my general suggestion. I will stop talking.
Okay, Commissioner Rodriguez is next.
Thank you. So, just to clarify, I'm not saying that we should, to operate in this capacity, through all the commissions. I believe because we started and we have made a little bit of exceptions throughout the, procedure and the manual. Hopefully individuals will naturally, gravitate to another, committee. However, I do find that if someone wants to serve, that I don't think it's fair to say, oh, now you have to be kicked off. That's the part I'm getting. I'm not saying that we shouldn't follow the 3 to 5. I think it should be their decision and not really, and I think it will hard to pick people or create a process that is fair.
Right. Commissioner Ridgway, I hear you.
Yes, to the chair. The recommendation regarding the way the co-chairs can be selected is also one of the topics we discussed for the committees as well. And it's exploratory, it's no commitment. And we may find that people, with some of the other committees opening up, you may find that people may deselect the committees that they're on in favor of one of the new committees that we haven't opened. The process that Ryan and I talked about would allow that. We're just trying to determine no commitment that anybody has to come off today or next week, or we're just trying to determine where the interest is. And I think that we may be pleasantly surprised, given the other committees that are opening up in terms of where people want to work and where their interests may rest, and what abilities and skill sets that they bring to these various committees. So we can see where that interest is, and we may find people deselecting committees that they're on in favor of some of the new committees opening up.
Commissioner Donaldson?
To the chair, I just want to add to that that was perfectly stated. I agree with that. And then we have to remember that as other committees open, we're not going to have the time to be on every single committee. I believe the last commission was 3 per committee, I want to say. So it's just, there's not going to be room for us to all be on, every committee. So I think people are going to realize that as the work really starts, that they're just gonna have to pick.
And our committee might be really boring for a while, so. Commissioner Benito.
I hear that, and I rescind my thing about redoing the committees. I do think, though, that what I would suggest we say is, if membership does not go down to 5 and under naturally, that I think we would say the chairs of the committee will randomly select. Through a random selection, will remove people from the committee. Because
Are we okay with if this is also something that you want the, Commissioner Ridgway, you want the ad hoc subcommittee to decide?
Yes, to have decide in conjunction with discussion with Ryan, because there is a way that if there are more people, that show interest in a particular committee, that they could be randomly deselected, and those that are deselected can choose their next committee, because you have a whole group of them. But I think that process can definitely be fleshed out along with assistance from staff, and how we do that. But we aren't determining who sits on a committee right now. We're just trying to see where the interest
And
is.
so, and if I'm hearing you correct, the interest may resolve everything. So let's,
Yes.
because we want to, we want obviously a random process. I know it seems fair, but it may not get everyone's needs fulfilled. That's the only thing.
Yes.
So we would like everybody to again, do the best. That the blind process was to have people place themselves in positions that they will succeed and excel. So, okay, so we, so that process, so we're deciding 1.45, that is going to be, the ad hoc committee is going to decide that.
Yes.
And we are still maintaining, I guess, or sorry, Mr. Goodberg?
Just 2 points in this here. One, I noticed this now, we didn't really talk about it the first time we read this, is each committee shall designate a chair. So are we changing that to the flexibility to have a chair or co-chairs here for committees?
My thoughts are with a 5-person, committee, 2 is a lot.
Yes.
And I don't think it's, that necessary to do, we've not, so we'll have to address that with the two committees that have
Makes
co-chairs.
sense. And then the only other thing is in conversations, the only thing I see here is you should most likely have, because you're going to form more committees. So this issue will keep rearing its head up until you have a process that's in your rules for what happens when there are more people interested than seats available. So you should have a process, right? It does, and then stick to that process. Most boards will just say, if that's the case, we defer to in this instance, it would be the co-chairs, and they just select it. That's how most boards deal with this conflict is giving powers to your co-chairs that you have elected to then say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And maybe the co-chairs say we're going to do a random process, but at least designate that some way to determine that conflict, or you'll be right back here in a couple weeks having the same conversation. So it's worth the time now.
To the chair and to the commissioners, there has been some preliminary discussion about how to create that process, but we want to start with whether we will even have that interest by multiple people, that will exceed that 5 limit on committees. Ryan has actually proposed something, and I think it's very workable. It's not, I would like for that discussion and that decision to come from the ad hoc committee in conjunction with staff.
So then we're leaving this as is. So I think, and then we're continuing the, the hope that naturalistically will work out. Commissioner Donaldson?
One thing I just want to clarify, because it's still a little blurry in my mind, but timeline wise and trying to think about the ad hoc committee and giving people the option of the committees and then the temporary committees and then outreach opening before police. Like I'm just trying to really understand the steps of when the selections are going to occur, in which order, like what will come first. Like that's the part that I'm still not quite getting.
Commissioner Benito?
Yeah, I would suggest that because we also have to address the fact that once we adopt these rules, some committees will be out of compliance. And so what I would say is that to give us time to do that, and then potentially to address, to give people the opportunity to, maybe they go through the interest process and naturally it comes down to 5, or maybe it ends up going to the chair or however we want to put it. I would say that we should put something in here that committees will be staffed, by the end of April, and that committees already formed prior to the adoption of these rules will be allowed to continue to operate as with their current membership until the end of April.
A question to the chair. Tell me again what we decided regarding the chairs. Their appointments will be when?
End of March.
End of March,
April 5th, April 5th.
April 5th.
Fifth, yeah.
April 5th. And then, Commissioner, Benito, what are you suggesting for the committees?
That committees will be staffed by the end of April, or whenever the closest meeting, maybe it's, we
Because,
can look at the dates. Because I mean, I do feel like that process can be happening concurrently to develop the interest and.
yeah, it definitely developing the interest, that exploratory piece. I think we would want to have the chairs in place so that those chairs are not being appointed to a committee. The chairs definitely can serve in ex officio capacity on each of the committees, but we don't want their names in the pot as one of the 3 to 5 members of a committee. We want to make sure that those chairs have been appointed before.
That's
we
why I'm
move
saying
to
the end of
appoint.
April.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I do want to, is there any, the only people enforcing the out of compliance is us, right? That's not so does it need to be in there? We just, I guess, what are we doing if the committees are still out of compliance? Does it need to be spelled out by April? And if she wants, so April 5th, so you want by the end of April.
Well, let me check when the meetings are.
Okay, and Mr. Johnson, in the meantime, do you have a comment?
I think the only comment I was gonna make was, if we pass section 1, it says 3 to 5. So then the committees that are over 5, I figured it out.
Right, they would be technically out of compliance.
Right.
What is the punitive measure? There's no punitive measure at this point. It's something that we would have to enact, so.
Yeah.
I don't know, it is 6:30. I want to alert us to that. And,
So are we gonna put that language so that we're not out of compliance?
do we, again, like with the exception of the first year, do we want to put that in?
To the chair, again, I don't think there should be an exception to breaking your rules. If you adopt these rules and it says 5, the next meeting, it is up to the chair of that committee to immediately remedy that situation. So, and the simplest way to do that is just ask. You know, we have to be 5. Is there anyone willing to get, that way it reduces conflict. If not, I would leave it to the chairs of the committee to come up with their own unique, creative way. But when these rules go into effect, 5 is 5. You know, that's the way I do it. But there's plenty of ways to do it without conflict, especially if they know that some of these committees have already done the brunt of the work that they're going to get done by this time. So if these rules go into effect in 2 weeks, there's possibly two more meetings of the budget and outreach committee for our budget and grants committee, for example. So they may have done the majority of the major work, and 2 people might be like, okay, I'm good now. So
Yeah, I would just
And
believe they
that's-
should
yeah.
self-select.
Well, I guess, you know, and I hear you, Commissioner Rodriguez, and you are the co-chair of a committee that needs to go through this process. So how would you, I guess what we're asking is, how would you handle it if there's not a self-deselection? How would you propose then?
So I believe that I would ask them, and I'm actually in favor if when we send out the survey, they may say, oh yeah, I would like to be a part of the police. And I feel that maybe the grants and budget, that would be too much. I think that people would naturally self-deselect. I do not believe that. I think we're overthinking this issue.
So, I mean, if, Commissioner Ridgway, when you have the ad hoc committee formed, when will the poll likely go out?
The ad hoc committee should be formed by Wednesday. The 8th.
Right, but we can do the poll very quickly, right? Because Brian has already determined a process. They just have to say, this process sounds good, then we can send it out, or do they need to deliberate on the process? Or are you gonna make, the process, and then just have the committee formed?
I think the committee will work with staff to finalize the process. And I guess from my perspective, I would like for it not just to be a written survey. I think there needs to be some verbal interaction. It's a way to get to know each other. It's a way to see what strengths different people bring to the table. You know, ultimately, they can choose whatever area they want, and that'll be anonymous anyway. Ryan will be setting that up, so we won't know who they are. They assigned, you know, a number or an alphabet or something. We won't know who they are because we're just trying to see how many people are interested in certain committees. And you may, like I say, you may find that most of them would be between 3 and 5 anyway, because we're opening up at least, 4 more committees?
Right.
3 police and outreach, that's 4 more committees. And once you eliminate the 2 co-chairs,
Right, so I'm just trying to get clarity. It's a blind process with the poll, but the ad hoc committee is still going to interview the people, all of us?
yes, they can still interview, but they won't be responding to our ad hoc committee in terms of where their interest is. They won't be responding to the ad hoc committee.
To the chair, I think I understand what it's kind of like career day. You know, they'll give you a paper and say, this is what the committees are about. You take that with you, you answer any questions they may have, and then they go take the blind survey, right? So I get I understand the concept there. I do have a suggestion, if you're open to it, and how you can maybe get through this in 20 minutes. We have 2 legal components still left. Those have been pretty much decided by the law department. I don't suggest we deviate from the law department. So you guys can just, if you agreed to accept the law department's language for conflict of interest and for executive session, then that allows you to move to the 1.9 and have a discussion there.
Okay, so we are, have we thoroughly addressed 1.45?
No.
No. Let's deal with let's maybe take a breather. 1.71, the executive sessions, that's the easiest one to change. We have, we have 1.71 executive sessions. That's the easiest one. We have a very thorough explanation from Amy Huff of the law department. So her suggestion, the original read, minutes shall be kept in executive sessions and can be approved in subsequent meetings in executive session. And her suggestion, Amy's suggestion, was motion to hold an executive session pursuant to revised code 1.2122G, section G, subsection 1, permitting executive sessions for personnel matters, specifically to interview and consider candidates for employment as quote unquote job title. And because the revised code is in there, so she also suggests that we make a separate section for the executive session as under similar to special meetings and emergency meetings, and expanding upon that with her language. So any thoughts on that? Would that be okay?
Point of clarification, I'm confused about what language we're talking about putting in there.
So it's on this, did you not get this handout?
No,
Sorry.
I'm looking at the handout, but
It's on the back of the first page. It's doubles. It says, if the commission is using
Where-
Q1 courts have sample language for the motion, it says.
right, no, but I'm
This part, motion.
I read
Yeah.
that. I'm confused about so the only suggestions you're talking about for changing what is actually in our rules is changing the shall to may and then adding in the sample language. That's what I'm trying to understand. There's a lot of text
We
here.
can, Mr. Goodrick, or we can just put that in. No, she's asking for a separate section.
So what I was trying to suggest is not debating what the law department wants and giving me the authority to create the language with the law department based on the emails that they sent back. So that way there shouldn't be debate. Like there's no reason to defer from what the law department is saying. So I see in this what she wants us to do. It's just a matter of me putting it in there. Same with Delante's language. So this is where, as the executive director, if I ask for a legal opinion and they give me it back, and I have to put that into a law, I do that. You know, I absorb what there's no conflict of interest here. They're telling you what Ohio law says, and they're giving you recommendations for how to make your rules compliant with Ohio and city law. So there's really no need for us to over debate the recommendations of law.
Commissioner Donaldson?
Yes, to the chair, I just want to clarify. So this sample language for the motion, I don't think we're saying that that's going to go in the manual. That's just a sample. So what we're basically saying is that we're going to, if you go to the very top of the document, that we're going to add that part in there. And then we're going to change the shall to may.
So we're gonna list. So from this, I can tell you where this is gonna go. It's gonna list the reasons why. It's gonna have its own section on executive session. It's gonna say these are the reasons, and this is how you create a motion to do it properly. So there's a lot of words here, and part of it is explanatory. So I'm gonna eliminate the explanatory part and take the content part and put it in here. Yes.
Okay, so, and I think the conflict of interest, Mr. Thomas did respond, but we need some points of clarification. We will continue on that point. So that means we're done with everything. We can go back to 1.45. Is there any other discussion? We can go to section 1.9 and get that done first before we go back to the discussion of 1.45.
I think we need to put in for 1.45. So once the rules are adopted, do we want to say that chairs
have discretion to.
Right. And because I believe it says in here that if there are more, and did we put in the language of if there are more people than, so I think we need to add that, because that could also be the thing that happens is, since the chairs will already be selected, if people don't self-select, it can go to the chairs. And not necessarily the chairs of the committee, but the actual chairs of the commission. And so I think that needs to go in there. So if there are more than 5.
There are more 5 desired candidates for committee.
Yeah. And then that just takes care of
the co-chairs of the commission will have final authority in populating that committee.
And then do we want to say something like in the absence of co-chairs, the committee chair will make that decision? Because when this is adopted, potentially next week, the co-chairs won't be selected yet. And hopefully people will self-select. But if people do not self-select, should we just say it will be at the, I think we should either say that it.
So that covers the scenario that some of the committees are in. Would that be okay? It would say in the absence of co-chairs of the commission co-chairs,
that the decision is made by the chair of the committee.
Chair and co-chairs of the committee.
Except we said we're not going to do co-chairs.
Well, right now there's 2 committees that have how the committee is seated. I mean, again, I want to ask, is there we have this kind of window that we're not in full compliance, right? What is the consequence of it? Because we want to give people, right? We don't want to force people, I understand.
My concern is I want to spell it out because there was significant conflict in the last meeting about the idea of picking and choosing which rules to follow. And so that's why I just want to spell it out. Like, if we know we're not going to be in compliance for a certain amount of time, let's just write that in, or create, just because I don't want to.
Right, and I was anticipating a non-naturalistic way from the beginning. Commissioner Richard, again, I want to ask, because you will be one of the people that potentially can make this decision. What would you foresee? Say, Commissioner Rodriguez, all 7 of your people want to stay on. What is your contingency plan then after that? How will you proceed?
Then we have to make the determination. But I think we first have to allow them to make that, right? I don't think we should say, oh, now you have to give off, without providing options of other committees to serve on, as well as determining their interest. So I really like the ad hoc because that provides at least some options.
Okay, so, but I guess I just wanted to ask, so you're comfortable with the language that says you will have, at some point, should we put a deadline on there?
So my understanding is in section 1.9, it gives a 2-week time period for the rules to go
It
into
doesn't
the,
have to, we haven't done 1.9.
Okay, right,
That was very
okay.
messy, so we should probably
address that.
undo a lot of 1.9 and
Okay.
make it more.
Right, so,
15 minutes, less than 15 minutes, do 1.9.
okay, I would just, my proposal is to say that if people do not self-select, the chair of the committee makes the determination. In the absence of the.
And
Mr. Goodrich?
so the strangeness of that, in my opinion, is this normally, a committee won't have a chair if you're just forming it. So this is a weird, I think the commissioner already made it clear that she believes this is a problem that will alleviate itself. So I don't think, and over talking it, I think you have a good plan for managing that. And, my recommendation would be, we don't need to write something in just because this one committee. I have faith in the commissioner to handle this business without conflict at this point.
And we have also, to Commissioner Benito's point, there is also one other committee that's out of compliance too, so we have to.
That committee hasn't even met yet, so
The training
Yeah.
committee is 6, right? I think it's 6.
The training
So,
committee.
Yeah, and again, I have faith in people.
right.
Once this rule passes, I think someone will just be like, fine, I'll go off it. I don't
No, I
really
don't.
like any of you on the committee anyway, so.
But I understand Commissioner Benito's post because we did have some faith and it kind of, it went awry, and we can, hopefully everybody can get back to, okay, so let's move on to 1.9 in 13 minutes till 7 right now.
We can do it.
We can do it. Thank you so much for the spirited discussion and thoughtful discussion. 1.9, entire section needs review and approval. Okay, so this talks about the amendment to the operation manual procedures and rules. Would someone like to just read this out loud, or so we can all process it, and then okay.
Yes.
All right, 1.9. The rules contained within this operating manual and the procedures and the rules outlined here may only be modified, revised, amended, replaced, or otherwise changed via the following process. A commissioner or the executive director, in conjunction with the chair, that would be co-chairs now, must place an amendment of the operating manual on the commission's regular meeting agenda. So just starting here, I'll read the whole thing, but the manual amendment must be read and discussed as part of the agenda of a regular commission meeting, or at least at one regular meeting prior to an amendment being the subject of a vote. And for the initial adoption of the manual and adoption of any proposed amendment to the manual to become effective, 2/3 of the permanent members, 9 out of 13, must vote in favor. The rules in the manual take effect 15 days after their publication in official minutes of the meeting. During the pendency of the consent decree between the United States and the city of Cleveland, addressing the performance of the Cleveland Division of Police and related organizations and systems, any and all modifications, revisions, amendments, replacements, or other changes to the manual must be in the best interest of meeting the objectives of the decree. The changes may be required to be presented to the court via the law department. This manual rules will be reviewed via committee at least once annually. So, a couple of things. This was cut and paste from old rules that didn't have a rules committee, so it bypasses the committee. So the most obvious change is that an amendment must be introduced through the rules committee. So that's one, right? So that's the simplest. so following in line with that, it would say the manual amendment must be read and discussed as part of the agenda of the Rules Committee meeting, so that would make more sense. At least one committee meeting. Prior to the amendment being the subject of a vote.
Have we been doing that? What?
They haven't been adopted.
Yeah, so they haven't been adopted. So this would just mean that you have to go through the process here at least one time before, you couldn't just throw it out there and say, vote on this. You have to have a discussion here. So it can't leave here without a discussion. That's the way I read it. So, you know.
Subject of a vote of the subcommittee or?
Of the full commission.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Maybe clarify that.
We're gonna remove subcommittee from everything. I'm gonna do that later. I have a note too, yeah.
Subject of a vote of the full commission, right?
Prior to the amendment being the subject of a vote of the full commission. Okay. The only thing I'd add in here is it has to be approved by the committee. So manual amendment must be read and discussed
And approved.
and voted on
There we go.
as a part of the agenda of the Rules Committee meeting, at least one committee meeting prior to the amendment being the subject of a vote of the full commission. Okay.
So,
Commissioner Benito?
Does that wording mean then it would have to be two, like, because by definition it will be prior to the full commission, correct? So should we just say it's part of the agenda of a rules committee meeting?
Before introduction. So I think you should say, you don't need that part as part of the agenda of a rules committee meeting prior to the amendment being
Yeah.
subject. You don't need that part at least one committee meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
That was just because we were
Right.
changing the previous
there we go.
part of the, maybe being introduced and the subject, so we can be clear, not just the subject.
Must be
Because
read
we're trying to
Sure, yeah.
make sure
Before being introduced
prior
to
to the
full
amendment being.
introduced or the subject of a vote of the,
Before being introduced to the full commission?
this is only for changes to the rules, right? So it's not all amendments.
Yeah, introduced. Okay,
Okay? So the initial adoption of the manual and the adoption of effective 2/3 must be in favor. So that is for the bylaws, right?
yeah,
Okay.
and it includes the adoption of this, so it's a strong standard. It's up to you all if you want to keep that standard, but rules should be a strong standard. Like, you really have to have agreement on the rules, otherwise they're too easy to change, so, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next part, yes.
So just a quick question. So when we take these bylaws to the full assembly on the 8th, this would be a part of it, or do we have to make a motion?
We just reintroduced it, right?
So tonight, if we conclude this here, you take a quick vote to
That's what I was
to bring
hoping
this
you would.
forward
That's what I was
on,
hoping.
with our next meeting.
Okay.
So you could really quickly, if you feel
After-
comfortable with your
after all this.
changes, plus what you asked me to change, right?
Right,
We'll follow the same process we did before. I'll do a summary of the changes. We'll send it out as a package, and they'll have about a week to read it before the meeting.
okay. I just want to make sure we were gonna take that vote
Yeah.
tonight.
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
We have the option of changing the number of days after publication of the rules, for them to take effect.
Yeah, and there's typically an acclimation period, right? So that's what that is, but you can waive that on the first one. You could say the first set goes immediately. Subsequent changes take 15 days, because sometimes you might have to change some other documents or do some other stuff.
Commissioner Benito, I would say that we take it out for the initial adoption, because then I think we couldn't do the things in the rules, like find the chair and stuff, so, yeah. I'd say, but I think that's a good idea for subsequent, changes.
With the exception of the first year. which will be immediate, maybe we should say. Will take immediate effect. There has to be like another comma there. Or we can just say the first adoption of the rules will take immediate effect. One sentence, yeah. Okay, that's a longer sentence. Okay.
Amended rules in the manual?
No. It will be the rules. It will be,
Yeah.
right, it will be the
And
amended.
subsequent.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
Looks good. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, and then the last, during the,
And that has to do with consent decree. That language is in there acknowledging the decree and the fact that sometimes there are higher powers who may intervene in their rules. That's why it's in there. I'm just letting you know, the DOJ might want to submit these to the court and they may argue that they're not, in compliance. So just so that we're aware of it.
okay.
To the chair, a couple of things I wanted to ask. So throughout the manual, there were headings that said this section cannot be changed or edited. Is that going to remain in there, Jason? I just want to be sure that it will.
We can leave that in there. Yeah, we'll find a way to keep that notation.
Okay.
I'll star it or something. This was for easy reference now. I don't think the color's the best way to do it, but yeah, that was part of the feedback, is to note where it's lawed for future reference. Yeah.
And then also in 1.4.6.1D, there was something about the executive director shall report to the. Should I change the co-chairs?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
We're
and
gonna do a global, I think, co-chair.
And anything that's out of compliance with what you guys agreed to is an automatic change. So even if it's caught later, it's acceptable.
And then one final thing, sorry, 1.3.2. At one point, we talked about adding the equivalent productivity activities part. We talked about adding what that meant. So just in parentheses, panels, research, etc.
At the bottom. One more down, two more down, right there.
Just to kind of,
Yeah, I was gonna
clarify.
today. It's yours.
That's it.
And before Commissioner Benito, Commissioner Van Leer did, I think, make some comments that we noticed on the document. Do we see anything of his? I think mostly he said co-chairs, chairs, committee, subcommittee.
Yeah. I could turn them on. I didn't, if you found this document, if it's the same one that he's referring to, they may be.
Mostly minor. Okay, Commissioner Benito?
I was just gonna make a suggestion for our next meetings pro tem, that we might want to consider staffing the outreach committee, because the outreach committee isn't staffed yet. It's said that we need to have that committee formed, and it's not covered under the police policy one. So that might be something to do.
So, Commissioner Donaldson?
Also, I think it would be a good idea when we send out the summary to also include some sort of timeline of, just laying out the dates that we've discussed, just to, give people an idea of that.
I just want to make sure there's nothing in there.
Yeah, I can't, for some reason, it's not showing the comments. That will probably take me a moment to. They should be coming up on the side.
Let me see if I can see.
I'm getting used to this online Microsoft 360. It's very annoying to me to learn. But are they just, if they're just context, if they're not context changes, if they're just micro edits, spelling and stuff like that.
Co-chair, subcommittees, co-chairs.
And it's okay if we're a few minutes over this evening to get this voted out.
The rules haven't been adopted yet.
To the chair, is this something that, Mr. Goodrich,
Mostly that, yes.
is this something that once, Mr. Goodrich has updated it, maybe he can send it to you or somebody on just to make sure we've caught all of those changes before it's just, printed and distributed to everybody?
Yeah, that's fine. I just think that if there was something that Mr. Van Leer wanted, he didn't mention specifically his email, I think he would have. Well, we would have to vote on it again. So I'm looking, but there's like 2,000 comments on this, so, it's hard to
Yeah,
find.
And I didn't get any notification that he,
Oh, he
Commissioner
commented.
Van Leer, that there was any, I didn't
He
get it.
said mostly minor, subcommittee, that chair.
Well, we've already agreed to make those
I don't see
particular
anything
changes.
else. All right. We should probably just get rid of some of those suggestions and comments. All right. So, this has been a thorough second overview of it, I feel. Any other thoughts before someone can make a motion to adopt all of the changes that we made today?
I move to adopt all the changes that we made today.
I second.
Okay.
I didn't see you made the motion, so. Oh, okay, thank you.
So we will take a roll call vote. The motion is to adopt all the changes that we made today to section 1 of the bylaws. Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yay.
Commissioner Benito,
Yay.
Commissioner Donaldson,
Yay.
Commissioner Ridgway,
Yay.
and I vote yay also. So motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. And so our meeting, I think we did have new business we have no time for. It was just an optimistic inclusion. We will get to that, I'm sure, in our next meeting. So I think is there any other business we need to discuss today?
For do we have our next meeting scheduled? Because I'm going to be out of town the 14th through the 18th, so my request would be, yeah, I just wanted to note that.
So let us check our calendars. The next commission meeting, so obviously it should be after the 8th. And you're gone 14th through 18th. Are we able to be, so 9th, I think people don't want to meet on Friday, right? 9th, 10th, or 13th?
I think those were.
What's the 13th of Friday?
I'm not there.
A Monday? Monday's okay. I don't want to be
Yeah,
on
next
Fridays.
week is Monday, so.
Yeah, that was our regular time, Monday,
Yeah, we got
before the
pushed.
holiday.
Is there are there any conflicts or? So that will be a good few days after our full commission meeting. And we'll have time to process the second part. I'll go through with Mr. Goodrich the parts that we will talk about. One of the ones that, that we saw as a preview was the media policy. Mr. Goodrich, what are you anticipating for the next discussion? What would you suggest?
Yeah, that's a good place to start as a media policy, and then we'll also talk about rules of the road for talking to city officials. So, right now we have some sidebar conversations going on and people asking for information already, which is there were some protocols with that to go through the office so we can keep track of what's going on and who's asking for what. There's specific timelines that documents are supposed to come to us. So we're getting close to the time to have to need that worked out. So we have 2 good parts we can look at next time.
Is it possible to get the draft of that sent out to us before so we can read it? Okay, awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, I just want to make sure I have nothing on the 13th. Nothing on the 13th. So 5 o'clock still okay? 5 to 7. So our next meeting will be March 13th from 5 to 7. And the public is welcome. And we will be at this location at Perkins. So thank you so much. I need, so unless there's any other business, if someone wants to make a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Can I get a second?
I second.
Okay. Okay, and as a best practice, I will do the roll call vote. Ms. Rodriguez, motion is to adjourn meeting.
Yay.
Benicio,
Yay.
Donaldson,
Yeah.
Ridgway,
Yes.
and me, Way, unanimously, and we are adjourned. Thank you so much.
You know, if it's within, everybody was doing what they're supposed to do, you make the motion, you second it, and the meeting is adjourned.
Oh,
It doesn't
really?
require
Oh,
vote
nice.
on it.
Oh, cool.
Not
That
unless
will
somebody
hit the
objects.
facility.
Only if you're extending it.
Only if you're extending it, no problem.
Yeah. Good job, Karen.